On this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk, Vault Economics. Can a print show work on Broadway? The Purple Spotlight, Bite the Boots, and more. Amari Purple Talk starts now. Welcome to episode 34 of Amari Purple Talk, a Prince podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funk soloist, and with that out of the way, let's start with our first topic. And our first topic is going to once again dive into a little thing I call vault economics. All right, so for those that have been Amari Purple Talk listeners from the very beginning, if you remember episode 2, where I go into this thing called vault economics, at that time, basically I was comparing kind of the decisions that the Prince estate were making versus the legacies of artists with vaults just as substantial. Of course, the obvious, it's always a reoccurring theme on this show, but I always use Jimi Hendrix as an example, Frank Zappa, Bob Dylan, because to me, those are the three best examples of how material from their vaults are being curated. Now, of course, we have 2 out of those 3 artists that are no longer on this plane of existence. So it's up to their respective estates. And while I covered a lot of the history between the 2 with Jimi Hendrix and Frank Zappa, won't go into too much detail with it here. But for reference, if you want to go back and revisit episode 2 on your favorite podcast platform, I don't have that up on YouTube. So you have to visit either through Libsyn or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you get your podcast. So go ahead and check that out at some point. But basically, there was a report on a source called The Blast. They have obtained court documents to where 3 of the family members of the estate are petitioning to be compensated from the monies that have been collected from the various Prince releases and other sources of income that the Prince estate have been generating pretty much since 2016. And the what do you want to call it? I'm losing my words here. Comerica Bank, who had been hired by the estate to administer this, is sort of seeking a block against paying said monies, and that's just due to there's still a huge tax debt with the IRS that needs to be met before there's a discussion of paying substantial royalties to the members of the family. If you want a really great analysis and in-depth detail, as well as commentary about the whole thing, I recommend you check out the Prince podcast. The title of the episode is Everybody Gets Paid But You. So if you're already a subscriber and haven't had a chance to check that out yet, go ahead and check that out. If you're a Patreon supporter, it was available for them exclusively in the beginning. Now it's everywhere. It's also on YouTube, which is how I was able to listen to it. And definitely check out the details. And like I said, they drop a lot of knowledge regarding the subject and some pretty valid points, regarding the whole issue. And I got to tell you, it's perplexing, and I guess the reason why I'm also bringing this up as a topic as well, when it comes to a lot of entertainers, the most recent probably would have been Tom Petty because certain family members were bickering. But I don't think there was an argument over getting paid. Just a split decision as to who actually owned what. And chances are Tom Petty had a will, but with or without a will, it just seems like a lot of our black entertainers, how far back does it go? Is it Ray Charles? Is it James Brown? Is it Sam Cooke? Michael Jackson, Prince. There seems to be this sort of almost divide and conquer strategy where eventually, the spoils being the royalties, the publishing, the ownership of masters, they almost always end up in the hands of or at the mercy of some kind of outside forces that ends up getting the sort of lion's share of the winnings. So, here we are again, where there's a situation where the family isn't properly getting compensated even after all this time. It's been 4 years now, but with the selling off of various real estate properties, the reissues, the box sets, the celebrations, the Paisley Park tours, you would think at some point that some type of arrangements are made to alleviating this tax debt. I don't know. I'm just perplexed by the whole situation of it. I'm not an attorney. I have worked at law firms before, so kind of have a little bit of an inkling as to kind of how all this works. But at the same time, this isn't a show where I'm qualified to just give out total legal advice. But again, kind of drawing on the templates of those that have come before. And like I said, I'll use, in this particular case, the best solution that I think, this is my personal opinion, I feel, again, should be the Jimi Hendrix Experience Hendrix LLC playbook on that. And basically, with Jimi Hendrix, now Jimi did have a will when he died, although unexpectedly and way too young. He still had a will in place, and it left everything to his father, Al Hendrix. And around 1972, so this is 2 years after Jimi's passing. So around 1972, he signed a deal with a company that basically signed the rights to to everything, the publishing and the master recordings and all of that. And what followed were these really, really poor quality compilations of vault material. Now, granted, there's a lot of fans that was their gateway, or they didn't know any better. They just thought, hey, this is some stuff that Jimi had in the vault, and they're putting it out and keeping the money rolling in, and we're going to pay our money for it. And that's the sort of mixes that they've been living with since since post 1972. Now, Al Hendrix did, once he kind of saw that he had been cheated out of a lot of the money from a lot of these projects, he did sue to win back control of the master recordings and the publishing and everything else. And it took literally a little over 20 years for that lawsuit to get resolved. But once it did, and once Al Hendrix got the rights back to everything, he and his daughter Janie began to become, once they became the executors of the estate, from 1996 on, have done a brilliant job at handling the Jimi Hendrix legacy. And I can't remember when Al Hendrix passed away. I think it was maybe the later 90s, early 2000s. I have to look into it. But long story short, basically once around 1996, 97, they got control of the masters and the publishing, made a deal with, well, what is now known as Universal. It was still MCA at that time, but made a deal with Universal and reissued, all of the albums that Jimmy released within his lifetime. The first set of vault material was called First Rays of the New Rising Sun. And the beauty of it is that Jimi Hendrix pretty much worked with one engineer throughout his career, and that was Eddie Kramer. And I mean, Eddie Kramer's bad engineer. I mean, oh God, I mean, his resume, you got to check out his resume. But basically, he was there, counseled Jimmy where at one time Electric Lady was just going to be a little big, huge nightclub with a little recording studio in the back just for Jimmy. It was Eddie Kramer that convinced Jimmy that, no, we need to make this. This is the template. Electric Lady is the template of what Paisley Park was. So I'm sure Prince kind of took notice of, Electric Lady and drew inspiration to say, okay, well, I'm going to build my own studio complex. And it's going to even take it a step further. I'm going to do movies and have my concerts there, where, Jimmy just needed a place to hang out. And since he was constantly recording, even his jam sessions were recorded. So, he just wanted a place to play, and jam and record all hours of the day and night and not necessarily have to worry about huge recording costs. All he needed to worry about was just keeping the lights on. So, but Eddie Kramer was very instrumental throughout Hendrix's career. So basically what the Hendrix family did was enlist him to oversee the remixing and the remastering. There's a gentleman by the name of John McDermott too that was also instrumental during Hendrix's career. So with these two in place, they were able to, come up with the various posthumous or posthumous compilations, box sets, which live recordings should be issued. And also what was clever too, for all you vault aficionados out there, it was also brilliant that they also came up with a subsidiary label within the Experience Hendrix banner called Dagger Records, which, their recordings that Jimmy has had where, all there was just a tape recorder, a cassette tape recorder, or certain bootleg recordings that the family went out and purchased, or somebody within the inner circle had a, not so great soundboard recording, but it's still things that were circulating within the collector's market amongst bootleggers, that they were able to take some of those and release them themselves. And it's like they can only remaster it so much. For a lot of you Prince fans out there that are complaining about the quality of the recording, sometimes what you get is what you get. All you have is just that. So if there was a certain master recording that Prince had, and maybe he took that out of the vault and overdubbed it and remixed it, therefore erasing certain elements of it, then that is now the official recording. And whatever state of whatever take alternate mix, original mix, if all that's left is your little cassette, or if you guys like to tinker with, the soundboards yourself, and you got it quite to where your ears want it to be, then enjoy it and shut up. So sometimes what you get is what you get, and for me, I'm happy to get what I get, so if there's something and all they had was just the cassette mix of it, well, then that's cool, give it to me. I want to hear it, and I want to pay my money for it and have that money go to the estate, and enjoy it, so. But getting back to the affairs of the estate, or the current state of affairs that's going on, I don't know, like I said, just my personal opinion is that instead of, and I've tried to look this up too, I've tried to research this the best way I can. Now, there is a Paisley Park Incorporated, and basically I think it was just the estate taking over something that Prince himself set up for the business purposes in which he needed to set up as a corporation. So an incorporation. So it was logic for him to set it up that way. And basically the estate inherited control of that business model. Given that we no longer have Prince to control things to where being Paisley Park Incorporated makes sense. Now, maybe in the running of Paisley Park as an enterprise, a record studio, museum, it may still make sense. But a way for them to kind of circumnavigate all this stuff, and you've got entities, they've been appointed to do what makes sense, and you want to get rid of that tax bill and you want to get rid of it quick. And again, that's one of the downfalls of not having a will in place, because if you guys can't sit down, or if someone didn't appoint you to manage that person's affairs once they've transitioned, then you have, long story short, government coming in to make those decisions for you. And 9 times out of 10, they're never going to be decisions that are in your best interest. So with that being said, my personal opinion would be, again, taking from the Hendrix playbook, the Hendrix family playbook. Set yourselves up. I mean, I know the estate isn't listening, and like I said, I'm not a lawyer, and so just take my advice with a grain of salt, and this is just one podcast host's opinion. But sit down and unanimously agree on a strategy, a business strategy, and then set yourselves up as whatever you want to call it, but set yourself up as a limited liability company. And start doing, I would say, since basically they do control the master recordings, they do have control of the publishing, then I would appoint, and I don't know, like I said, to me, the Hendrix model is because, with John McDermott and Eddie Kramer there, and I can't remember any other people that Jimi Hendrix may have hired that were probably there with Hendrix since, if not day one, at least by the second album, these people were in place. So they're best qualified to oversee it and, give advice as to, okay, well, how would he have handled this recording? start building a team, not to borrow from Rich Dad, Poor Dad or something. Put together your mastermind group, because that's the thing. It's hard enough, just us being ordinary people and somebody passes, and if they do have a will or whatever set of instructions, living will, whatever it is, it's hard enough because none of us are really trained to deal with that. And then when something happens, you have to educate yourself really quick about it. But that being said, there was only one prince. And bottom line, there was arguably one real successful, I'll put it that way. There was only one successful artist, major artist in this family dynamic with that. So yeah, when this on that level, and none of us are really qualified to comment on that level of things, because there's only one Michael Jackson, there's only one Prince, there's only one James Brown, there's only one Jimi Hendrix, there's only one Ray Charles, only one Sam Cooke, so none of us are really qualified, unless we have a serious entertainment law degree, or a serious degree in estate planning. Then none of us are really qualified to dictate terms on how to deal with things at that level. It's just, I couldn't imagine, I couldn't imagine walking into that, and if they said, hey, you, Richard Cole, take this over and you start making decisions about what to do. And it's like, well, hell, all I know, there's the Jimi Hendrix playbook, and I know they should set up as an LLC, but beyond that, to try to make those decisions, it's perplexing. So you got to kind of cut them some slack. But from the looks of things, just based off of the article, and there was another source that I tried to follow as well, but I did see, I forget that it's called Your Web or something, but I saw Stephen Ivory's name attached to that. And for those that don't know Stephen Ivory is a journalist. It goes all the way back to, for me, the days of Black Beat magazine. And, he always had the, like some of the exclusives when it came to Prince or the Minneapolis Sound, that type of thing. And he was also part of a show we all used to listen to back in the day called Radioscope. And again, he was sort of like he wasn't the host of the show, but he was one of the, I don't know, kind of one of the radio personalities that I guess if he was doing the investigative piece on, say, what happened between, when St. Paul left the family and what was Prince's reaction, that type of thing. So if it was his story, then he would be the one, kind of like 60 Minutes, whoever was assigned the story was the one that got to talk about it on this show. So that was a pretty good show. Actually, that was the first time I heard when they leaked the hallway version. It was a snippet of the hallway version of Computer Blue. And I guess that was before the 0 hour to edit it down for Purple Rain to make room for the beautiful one. So anyway, I digress. But I know they covered the story as well. So to me, that was a reliable source. I didn't know too much about the blast, but according to their article, they had obtained copies of the legal documents, which I guess, those are up for public viewing. So I guess you can go to the Minnesota court's website and view those documents. So yeah, so I guess with this being a situation where there's this sort of entity that's not related to the family, but was appointed by the family, and they're telling the family you can't have a penny, of anything right now, but they own everything. So it's a weird, crazy situation. But I would say, like I said, if it was me, and like I said, this is just my opinion and my take on things, set up as an LLC, and then what you can do is start generating, I would say, maybe create that website. Or go back, create that team first. I don't know who you would pull in, which you probably would have to pull in, because Prince didn't have like an Eddie Kramer from the beginning of his career all the way to the end. There's a key engineer for each era. So I would probably say, depending on the era, you start assigning those engineers whether or not to be hands-on remixing stuff or remastering stuff. At least bring them in as consultants on that end of it. Then you get, I don't know who you would get, anyone past, present, that had, I would put it this way, a good working relationship with Prince that didn't end. Of course, take that with a grain of salt, because, Prince being the artist, the type of artist that he was, he could be cool with you one minute and not cool with you the next minute. But find somebody that at least left on good terms. Hey, I bring Alan Leeds in. I know it sounds like a cliche, but again, bring him in as a consultant if he's not hands-on day to day. Pay him whatever consulting fee you would have to. But come up with a business strategy, whether it's the no-brainer of putting together, starting off with a serious, comprehensive compilation, not just a bunch of songs stuck together, not an originals type deal. I mean, put together, whether even if it pulls from all eras, just put together a suite of songs that at least feel like they belong on the same record. And if you can't get it to, don't bring in so-and-so, don't bring in Pharrell, don't bring in Timbaland, don't bring in Kanye, don't bring in anybody don't touch it. Like I said, bring in whatever era engineer, mix that or master it properly, put that out, and then the money that's generated from that initial compilation, then with an LLC, what it does, it sets you up as, even though you're the business owner, it sets you up to pay yourself as an employee, so you're not heavily taxed. So if your profits come in, the bulk of your profits can still go alleviate that tax debt, but you set yourself up with whatever number for your personal salary to where that doesn't get touched. You deal with that with your own taxes around tax time. But as far as the company goes, whatever tax debt needs to be taken care of, then the bulk of those profits will go to that. And then whatever percentage you set up, and it's split 5 ways, then you start to generate income. And then every deal that's made from that point on is dealt with from the standpoint of a limited liability company. In that way, in that regard, over time, you can probably start to kick Comerica Bank to the curb at this point, because again, once you've established your team, in addition to the engineers, in addition to hiring like an Alan Leeds type of person to kind of broker certain deals in regards to record companies or film projects, put together a good financial team as well. Because like I said, that's the thing. Like I said, there's only one major successful artist in the equation, and only that successful artist knew how he wanted things to be from top to bottom, whether us as fans agreed with it or not. Whether we're putting that yardstick against other entertainers is irrelevant. at the end of the day, it was his decision to make. And from what I was listening to, it was the Hit and Run concert from 2000. And I guess he made this speech throughout every single stop on the tour. But the one I listened to, he was definitely hitting it home. And he was like, hey, at that time, technically, he didn't have a lot to leave for his family. Now, he did own his publishing. He did just get the rights back to his publishing then. But that fight for his master recordings was still there. And because he was independent, there was still that sort of fight for relevancy as well. But the main issue was the master recordings. So at least at some point in time, there was a plan for that. I mean, we're not going to get into conspiracy theories. Is there a will in existence? Is there not one in existence? That'll be a debate for another day, or really it's irrelevant to what's really happening now. And again, if it was by design that one just all of a sudden disappeared, like I said, again, when does it stop? Like I said, Ray Charles, James Brown, Sam Cooke, that's the thing. So hopefully they'll put themselves in a position to where, they won't be edged out and lose ownership of these masters or ownership of the estate as a whole. So, I don't know. Like I said, there's so many theories, but like I said, we won't get into it. But honestly, for me, like I said, the best solution that I can think of is that if they set themselves up as their own company, in regards to ownership of these masters, and start creating projects that at least in the beginning, it won't be a lot, or it'll be better than what's happening now. Because it sounds like they're not getting a single solitary penny out of any of this that, we're supporting. And, it's a thing of, I guess we have to ride it out. I mean, I know we're just the fan base and we enjoy what we enjoy. But I'm telling you, it will be a hard thing if they all get cheated out of that. It'll be a hard thing to support that from then on, So, like I said, I want my energy to go to them finding us a loophole, a solution, or something that will allow them to start being compensated. It goes back to what Prince was saying before. When will we be paid? So, no, but what's most important is, what do you guys think? Is running that Hendrix playbook, setting themselves up as a limited liability company, will it make a difference? If somebody has a better legal understanding of it, please feel free to comment and let me know your thoughts. And now we're going to move on. Speaking of special projects, the next topic is, can a Prince themed, I don't know how you would put it, a Prince themed concept work on Broadway? And, kind of struck me because I kind of go back and read past issues of Uptown Magazine. I only have the PDF version of the Vault, so I missed out on getting that one. Darn it. But, I kind of go through it and, sometimes on YouTube, just kind of see what people post. Some people have some interesting videos and live concerts and, Vault materials. And, I kept reading about this, Glam Slam Ulysses. And I know it had songs that actually ended up on Come, songs that ended up on the Gold Experience, some kind of like interactive, didn't really come out until Crystal Ball. But at one point, Strays of the World too, that was another one. But at one point, the bulk of these songs were part of this, again, a big, huge concept that Prince did. He only did like a handful of shows under this Glam Slam Ulysses title. And I also know, he seems to be, he was always trying to collaborate with someone on a Broadway play. There's that song with, hang on, let me get the CD so I don't butcher this guy's name. But on the Come album, the song Solo, which was composed by Prince and David Henry Hwang. That name I've only heard just a little bit of, and I believe he's connected with Broadway. So, and also too, I think there was Neil Carlin's upcoming book. I remember an interview. I think he also was collaborating with Prince on a Broadway show or Broadway style show. I don't know. It just seems like every few years you would, anybody that wrote about Prince, and that would be kind of like this one sentence thing, where he's collaborating with somebody for Broadway. And I know the Glam Slam Ulysses, I know as a concept, from things that have been written about it, the songs were great, the performances were great, but as a sort of a Broadway concept or as a concept in general, it didn't really come off. So I'm wondering if you take maybe the basics of that, because a lot of that was based on Greek mythology. So, where you had the 3 Chains of Gold, which was sort of like loosely based on sort of Egyptian, ancient Egypt a little bit, which that theme was revisited for Emancipation as well. But then with this and the name change, then it started going into Greek mythology. And based on the Iliad, Homer's Odyssey. And I'm wondering, again, I don't want to see a really cheesy thing on Broadway where, it's sort of the easy way out, where it's like, oh, here's Purple Rain on Broadway. I do not want to see Purple Rain on Broadway. I don't want to see, I don't know, you can almost make an argument for Under the Cherry Moon being on Broadway. Almost. And Graffiti Bridge, you better rewrite that whole thing for me if you want to put that on Broadway. But I mean, I'm not a Broadway person. I respect the craft for what it is. I know a lot of people that do it, and I respect them doing it, and celebrate them or support them, or used to support them when I could. But it was never a thing. It's not really anything I go to. I don't watch the Tony Awards or anything like that. But like I said, I respect, an artist celebrating their chosen field, or, there's a lot of movie actors that, they kind of keep their skills sharp, by either returning to Broadway or getting into Broadway now that they're famous or whatever. But I don't know, but as far as Prince, it seemed like that was something he was always interested in, but the right concept, or then again, maybe he had the right concept, maybe it was a matter of, again, control and ownership, and the most important thing, how much money, was he going to make from this? But I'm thinking, like, if you got, and again, like I said, forgive me, I don't know all the big names behind the scenes in Broadway. So I don't know, the only one I can think of now that's contemporary, and that's only because, at one point when you were turning on the TV, all you were hearing about was Hamilton. So that Lin Manuel Miranda, I think that's who he is. Maybe if you got somebody like that to kind of go through or analyze that initial concept for Glam Slam Ulysses, and not necessarily just say, hey, I'm going to put that on Broadway, but if there's something about that particular project that clicks and he can turn that into something successful, I could see that actually working. Or would that suite of songs work? Or could you have someone like him kind of go in, maybe take a look at the catalog, the official catalog, maybe grant some access to the vault, and maybe come up with an original concept, or heck, kind of tighten up the weaker points of Under the Cherry Moon, do a rewrite of Graffiti Bridge, just, have that make some sense. I mean, I'm not, not crapping on Graffiti Bridge, but yeah, it just was just not my movie. I loved the album because I bought it long before the movie came out, and to me that was like the most brilliant Prince album. And then the movie came out and just really wrecked my feeling towards the whole album. But I mean, there's still a few songs I love. I still love Elephants and Flowers. But anyway, and Joy and Repetition, of course, and a few other things. Like most of side one works for me. Side two, I kind of struggle with now because of the movie. But I don't know. If you can get somebody to kind of go in and again just find the story from that basic concept and make it work for the Broadway stage, then again, that's another way to generate some income. Of course you have to get somebody to finance it first, but or if Chimera, they say, hey, we'll finance this project on Broadway, and then that'll generate income and everything goes to the estate, I don't know. I mean, I would rather see like some original concept. Like I said, just go in, maybe not necessarily take the hits, but if there's like, I'm sure there's all kind of concepts and unreleased albums in the vault. Or, like I said, if somebody that's pretty well, or get somebody to work with, say, Michael Howe, collaborate on that level as far as picking the initial songs, picking some songs in there that, would go well with the story, that fit with certain beats in the story. And just an original concept, like I said, I don't want to see Prince's life story on Broadway. I don't want to see Purple Rain on Broadway. I don't want to see any of the other two movies on Broadway. But, just really good, like I said, a really good original story, and just use songs that we haven't heard before, too. So that might be a good idea for that. But, if not, like I said, if you can take elements of the Glam Slam Ulysses and kind of, make those things work where I think critically, they were saying that those elements didn't work. But I mean, the songs worked well. So I could see that, and of course, it's always hard to get people to, it's hard for someone to cover Prince songs and make it work. But I mean, that would be the beauty of having something like this be unique, or even taking something from that we've never heard before as a measuring stick, to judge the performance on that. Because I think that would get a lot of, from the fan base, it would be this thing of they'll never sound as good as Prince. But if you take something from the vault, and especially things that either we've rarely heard of or never heard of, or things that we all can unanimously agree would work, you know, it's like, oh yeah, that song would be great on the Broadway stage. And you get whoever you get through the audition process to do it, you know. And like I said, make it an original story. You know, I don't really want to see somebody dressed up as Prince per se, or trying to imitate Prince, but, you know, have those suite of songs fit the characters. In other words, you write this story to serve the characters. You pick the songs to serve the characters. You know, not have these actors or actresses serve the thing. They're doing their job by bringing their craft to it. And you find the best actors and singers and dancers that fit this story, that they're able to serve the characters as well as the story, and make those songs and interpret those songs to make us feel the emotion as it pertains to that story. So, you know, I don't know. I would say an original tale would work with that. But again, what do you guys think about that as far as Broadway? Would you like to see a sort of revised Glam Slam Ulysses and utilize, you know, Strays of the World and Dolphin and Interactive, you know, and have that work? Or, you know, would you like to see Purple Rain or Under the Cherry Moon on Broadway? Or would you like to see a totally original concept? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And now we're going to end our topics for the day, and we're going to move on to our Purple Spotlight. And our Purple Spotlight is a segment that highlights a Prince album, film, video, or an associated artist. And today's Purple Spotlight is on the book Picturing Prince by Steve Parke. All right, so basically Steve Parke began his work with Prince in 1988. He was introduced originally to Sheila E., and then became close with Levi Seisher, who was her guitar player at the time, but ended up being later on part of the Sign of the Times Lovesexy band, which was probably one of the best bands, probably in my top 5 of the best lineups he's ever had. So, but Levi convinced Steve to show Prince some of his work, and from there, Prince hired him to design everything from album covers to merchandise to sets for different tours and for videos. And somewhere down the road, he also became Prince's official art director for a number of years. So September 5th of 2017 saw the release of Steve Parke's book entitled Picturing Prince, An Intimate Portrait. And, you know, of course, we're all, you know, staying home and kind of indoors, and except for me, I'm out of the doors 3 times out of the week. Somewhat essential, but yeah, like I said, our hours have been drastically cut down too. So, other than, you know, so trying to stay entertained while staying home, I've been trying to catch up on movies and books and music, and you know, trying to finish some projects here and there as well. So a while back on my Kindle, I purchased Picturing Prince, and just really hadn't had time to really look into it. I started reading it and never got a chance to finish it. So during all this free time, I had a chance to get into it and finally finish it. That and another book called There Was a Time James Brown, The Chitlin Circuit, and Me. It's by Alan Leeds. Almost done with that one too, but definitely that book you should check out as well. I mean, it's, really, really rich with history, and not just of James Brown's peak, as being the godfather of soul, but, just the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, just basically the climate of, what the world was going through Alan Leeds' eyes at that time. But definitely check that out. But back to Steve Parke's book. Like I said, I just finished reading that. And, I enjoyed it a lot. It's just, the photographs, of course, obviously are the appeal and the great thing about the book. But just a lot of the personal anecdotes, a lot of them are connected to the various photos in the book. And some are not, but I mean, just a lot of the stories and the anecdotes, are really fascinating to read, because a lot of it, even though it's basically about a mundane work day, but it's a mundane work day with Prince. It's like, here you're at your job and Prince is your boss, and it's just like, wow, like anybody else's situation at work, it's just that Prince is your boss. And, so those anecdotes and just that perspective, because, a lot of us, we've had the sort of the media perception, and then for good, bad, or indifferent, there was the perception that Prince always had control of. And you never, for us, we never got to see behind the curtain, we just have to hear stories from other people. And kind of there's this leaning like no one's qualified to say anything about Prince, beyond this is the greatest guy on earth, and it's like, yeah, but he's a person just like anybody else. He just plays way more instruments than we do, and for a lot of us plays a lot of instruments way better than we do. And he's Prince, so, there's sort of this thing that, or perception that it's like he can't be a human being, for whatever reason you're holding on to it, but like I said, a lot of these anecdotes, this was, a human being with, a complex of emotions, no different than any of us, we all can't be one thing to everybody all of the time, there's, folks I adore, and then sometimes they rub me the wrong way, and vice versa. There's people that's like, that want to keep you in that sort of 1980s glass of water. There's people that, for whatever period you're going through, want to keep you into that, and not let you sort of evolve, or grow, or how dare you be interested in other things. They just want to kind of keep you in that pocket because it makes them feel safe, not realizing that it's like, it's okay for you to grow as well, and we all deal with that. And, it's just the fascinating thing about this is that, this is somebody, we buy the records, and like I said, there's the image on the record cover. There's what you see in the music videos, and then there's what you see on whatever's being said on the record, and we're playing the records backwards and turning the record sideways, like, well, what did that mean? Or, oh, we know everything now because we played it backwards. And that's not always the case, or as Han Solo would say, that's not how the Force works. So it's beautiful to kind of get these anecdotes, and again get that sort of peek behind the curtain, because it makes Paisley Park feel like a very fascinating place to have, want to be an employee. I don't know personally, if we're talking, 1988 through the 90s, just me speaking now as a, 54-year-old person. Yeah, I can easily say, yeah, now I could probably have risen to the same challenges. But then I also know me too. And it's just kind of like, it would have been a thing of, your mama, So it's, I don't know. It would, but like I said, if it was a perfect world, if it was a different area of the, the quantum realm there, then I don't know. I think that would have been fun, coming up with the album covers and doing the photography and stuff like that. I never thought about it myself because I was too busy, like, just wanting to, kind of write my own songs or whatever, so, do my own musically, just so busy focused on wanting to do that. And I was already doing freelance photography, and it was a pretty good lane, really pretty good lane there. So, as something I never really thought about. I never kind of had that aspiration to work with anybody on that particular level. It just would have been too, in a way, too intimidating. But then at the same time, like I said, when you read those anecdotes, it's like, oh, that could have been a lot of fun, to do that. And, wish there was an opportunity now to do that, so. But it's good to kind of live through Steve Parke's eyes and get a lot of those anecdotes. And like I said, the photographs, I really, I think I took more notice of it. I don't know. I kind of took it for granted, really, in the beginning, because, you pour through the album covers and you're looking through the liner notes and it's like, oh, designed by Parke or photography by Parke. And it's like, oh, well, that's a damn good photograph, and just take it for the granted that way. Like, oh, that's great. But I think kind of, once I, friended him on Facebook and just kind of looking at his posts and, before and after Prince's passing, then I got to be, I was able to take more of a closer look and kind of have the ability to look at it more with a photographer's eye and go like, oh yeah, to be inspired, it was inspiring then. You're looking at the album covers. Like one of my favorite photos in the book are the sort of Rave into the Joy Fantastic era. And the little sequence of photographs in the book where he's wearing the suit. Looks like it was taken from the set of the Greatest Romance That's Ever Been Sold video. And, I remember when I got the Rave into the Joy Fantastic, when I got that remix album, and those photographs were in that, or versions of that photo session was in that book, the CD booklet. That was like, damn, that should have been the cover, to me, the cover of the book. Because now the Rave Unto the Joy Fantastic, the actual way that the, as far as the jewel case of it, it was that sort of cheesy plastic and that sort of cheesy lamination. That was a lot of the hip hop records from the South at that time. A lot of the Cash Money stuff, a lot of the Masterpiece stuff. It was this sort of, because Photoshop could be as cheesy as it could be beautiful. And, that was sort of the Cash Money style. And that kind of worked for them. And I didn't think it necessarily worked for Rave Into the Joy Fantastic. Now, when it was the Rave Into, then it was more of your traditional plastic covered, your clear glass, plastic glass jewel case, and there was no, lamination over the photography. So to me, that was better than the Raven 2 cover. And reading about the original cover, which is actually now the Ultimate Rave cover, how that came about with the whole Elvis thing, with his back turned to the camera and he's kind of doing the little Elvis move with that. To me, yeah, once I read like that was the original cover, I would have preferred that cover. But, the big wigs at Arista decided, no, we must have his face on the cover. There, you naughty boys, can't have backs on the cover on that. So, yeah, so that's sort of one of the things that's my favorite from that book. But like I said, just looking at it now, kind of with my re-energized photographer's eye, then it's like, wow, it's like I could really take it all in and really be inspired now, as a photographer. It's like usually when I see other, like, folks like him, let's see, I mean, I've had sort of the sort of art history go-to guys, and gals, from the Ansel Adams to the Georgia O'Keeffes and names that escape me, but also studied fashion photography for a bit too. So, of course, there's the Herb Ritts, there's the Richard Avedons, and I would get inspired by that. Oh, wait a minute. There's, let's see, Yusuf Karsh. And let's see, and then there's, oh, snap. Let's see, why am I drawing a blank on this guy's name? This has now become a podcast on photography, folks. Yeah, let's see. Why am I... There it is, right there. Darn it, I am kicking myself right now because I even did a paper in high school on the Harlem Renaissance. But James Van der Zee, that was another influence. And Yusuf Karsh, as far as, like I said, when you talk about history of photography, and really my initial inspiration was Gordon Parks. But as far as rock and roll photographers or rock and roll photography, the Beatles photographers, Astrid Kircher, Robert Freeman, those photographers inspire me. Linda McCartney was an inspiration. So when I see work like that, those are the things, it keeps your eye for composition sharp, or you're looking at the lighting and the contrast. Is it black and white? Is it color? And the way the light hits it? What's shutter speed? Things like that. What aperture did they use? What type of cameras did they use? What lenses? Things like that. So those things, just automatically as a photographer just inspire me to want to keep going, to want to keep doing it. And, so like I said, friending this guy on Facebook, and then when I see his post, then I was able to look at it from that perspective, and then, not get inspired because, that's a really cool album cover, that's, Prince being cool on an album cover, it's like, no, I'm looking at the photographer and how he managed to come up with that finished product now. So, like I said, so actually taking the time to kind of read this book and kind of go back and take a second, third, fourth look at the photographs. Like I said, the ones from the rave into and unto the Joy Fantastic era, those are my favorites. The shots with the basketball are my favorites too. That I used to have this class called Natural Light Photography, which is a whole nother story in itself, but not for here. But the long and short of it is, in the curriculum for that class, there were two of the assignments in mentioning these particular basketball shots. There was a assignment we had dealing with subjects isolated by light. So here you have Prince, taking the jump shot, and he's frozen right there. And, everything is sort of black in the background except for him. The flash is definitely hitting him on it. And that would make him isolated by light. But also at the same time, there was another assignment which pertained to definitely all three of the photographs. And that's one of the decisive moment in that. And that's just basically you're capturing the subject right there in the action, and everything is there. So that particular movement that you managed to freeze in time tells the entire story of that photograph. And those things kind of stick out to me in that book. And there's a lot of them. I could probably do a whole podcast on that myself, but it's a great book to have. Again, there's a lot of criticism about, now that Prince is gone. Of course, we would not have seen any of these books from it, unless he himself authorized it. So, I don't look at a lot of this as cashing in. I haven't seen, except for that one guy with the Deliverance EP. That was definitely cashing in, but I don't really see a lot of these people cashing in. What I do see, and like I said, especially from this book, from Morris's book, and, for all you people that's got our boy on a huge pedestal, it's just like, get over it. He's a human being. Like I said, how many people, if you're just absolutely adored by everyone, good on you. Because when I deal with my day gig, there's people that they are really pissed off because it's like, hey, I got a job to do, and there are policies in place that if I do not follow those policies, my behind is on the unemployment line. And there's not enough followers of Amari Purple Talk to sustain me. I have yet to record a hit song, So until those things happen, policies must be enforced for the sake of responsibility. And that's become sort of my mantra. I would really rather have you pissed off at me for doing my job than out here struggling trying to be your friend. Because it's like knowing good and well, I break this rule, you are not going to support me, my family, or you're not going to, even compensate me with even $1,000. You know what I mean? So we're not having that discussion. But anyway, the long and short of it is that nobody is perfect as a human being. We all have our good days. Now, we all struggle to try to do good every single day of the week, and that's the ultimate goal. But you're not going to please everyone. And like I said, even within family dynamics, within friend dynamics, we all have feet of clay at certain times. Sometimes we're just caught on a bad day. Sometimes we're just at our lowest point. Sometimes we've given up on something, or whatever the circumstances are. But hopefully what comes through is the overall goodness. If you have not totally turned yourself over to the dark side, then, you've pretty much got a shot at making it through all of this okay and still being loved by as many people as possible. But then there's people out there that they just don't want to be happy, don't want you to be happy. But that's another discussion for another type of show. But again, it's like I don't see these situations being where they're cashing in. But what I do see is where, in the case that now that these people are no longer here to so-called defend themselves, then there's this attempt to either, sort of whitewash things, or just limit things to a certain perspective, or limit things to even oftentimes the wrong perspective. In this case, some people like Sinead O'Connor, for instance, but, so I don't see it as that, but I do see those that have been close fighting to preserve the balance. And that's like, no, he wasn't perfect. No, he wasn't always nice. Certain things he probably could have handled better, but at the end of the day, he had to do what he had to do. And, he didn't beat up anybody. He didn't abuse anybody. And at the end of the day, there was a goodness that was still there. There was a sense of compassion that was still there. Even all the way to the end. Even if people haven't spoken to him in years. That type of thing. And I see them preserving it because if you leave it to the type of sort of entertainment and sort of the way things are passed off as journalism nowadays, then, a lot of our heroes are in a lot of trouble. Because they're not caring about, the good of the person or the person at all. It's like, okay, that person's gone. What kind of dirt can we dig up? And, for a while it was like the wolves were coming. But thankfully you have the Andre Simones. You have the Jill Jones out there. You have, the Steve Parks out there that's balancing that equation. Like, it's like, no, wait, back up. That dude wasn't what you saw in the Purple Rain movie. That was not that dude, or, whatever the situation. Or, yeah, he may have changed his name to a symbol, but he was far from crazy, which, that's the thing too. Now with hindsight, even people not as well versed in the history as we are understand that was a power play. There was a logic behind that, and there was a great sacrifice in doing that. And he knew that going in, that he would lose some fans or people would think he's gone, crazy or whatever. But at the end of the day, like I said, there were people that were in the trenches, during whatever era, they got to be behind the curtain and they saw, the good days and the bad days and the various moods, or they learned, when to step in sometimes, but mostly when to kind of step back too. So, I'm glad a lot of this stuff is coming out because, there's questions that we've always had for decades, since the 80s. And, he wasn't readily volunteering that information. We always had to, again, play the records backwards, hold the cover up to the mirror or something and, read something backwards or whatever to figure it all out sometimes. But, so it's good to kind of get these sort of glimpses. And like I said, kind of keep that balance. Have this stuff on record to say, again, like I said, the beautiful ones was, man, could you imagine if he was able to have completed that? That's there for posterity. And that's, maybe he would have looked at it like, oh man, I got too real. Can't put this out. But that would have been in the vault until, the time would have come for us to learn it. And I think that's the thing. It's like there's no more pressure on him to kind of stay within that bubble. He's in a place now to where what's going on here isn't really a concern anymore. So, there hasn't been, anything that's it's made me say, oh, well, I'm not going to buy another Prince record again. How dare he say that? Or, how dare he not pay Morris Day money or whatever. It's like, like I said, we've all have, had complicated relationships on every level throughout all of our lives. It's part of the nature of being a human being. So, like I said, I'm, glad a lot of this stuff is sort of coming to the light, and, looking forward to more of it to come. And then, you make up your own mind, like if you want to read somebody's book, read it. If you don't, then don't get it. But definitely this book, I would say, it's a good one to get. Like I said, there's other Prince photographers that have books out as well, which I don't have possession of, but I'm looking forward to checking out a lot of the other ones as well. But this one was a really good, I don't know. I mean, like I said, beyond the photographs, I knew I was going to get into the photographs and, like I said, look at it with that photographer's eye. And I really wasn't sure, as far as, I thought I was getting something like, okay, well, this well, you do get that. This picture came about because of blah, 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 blah. But like I said, maybe 50% of it, if that much, there's just pure anecdotes. It's not always related to the photographs in the book, but just nice little personal observations, interactions, just really good stories. So definitely, if you do not have this, definitely check it out. Like I said, I've got it on my Kindle. At some point, I'm going to get the actual hardcover, or if there's a paperback edition, whatever version I can get my hands on, as far as physical media, then, I definitely want to have that as well. And I don't know if there's a volume 2, or if there needs to be a volume 2. Hopefully, I know they've retained him for that Ultimate Rave. Oh, and the Emancipation too, because he had to reproduce a lot of the materials for that reissue as well. So hopefully they can utilize him for more of stuff like that, or any reissues or compilations down the road, or box sets, contribute to that. So I hope they consider him for that, some of that as well, especially if it's from the eras in which he was actually there, creating the album covers and being the art director. That, again, that's one of those you can have on a team. But definitely check out that book if you don't have it. Of course, you can get it from Amazon, or probably once our local mom and pop stores reopen, or even our half-price books or Barnes & Noble reopen, then by all means, check it out. But again, let me know what you think. If you already have this book, what were your thoughts about it? Did you enjoy it? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And then now we are going to move on to our Bite the Boot segment. And our Bite the Boot segment highlights a circulating bootleg or vault recording or video for consideration for an official release by the estate. And today's Bite the Boot selection is live at the Omni. And this particular concert is significant because Prince at that time was the opening act for Rick James. And you can approach this one, because I don't know, I'm going to do somewhere down the road the merits of having, say, For You and then Prince as deluxe editions. Because I don't know, there's vault material that you could pull from that, but I don't feel that it would be as extensive as what you would get, say, maybe from Dirty Mind onward. But definitely, I would say, where I think the vault becomes legendary starts around 1982 and then goes forward from there, actually. Like I said, not to say that you couldn't do bonus cuts or anything, but just because of the set list, it's basically pulling from the first two albums, and this is sort of Prince kind of making his bones as a stage performer. And, this was where, he was definitely giving Rick James a run for his money at this period. But I thought this would be significant, because I know if you've listened to Amari Purple Talk for the last few episodes, there's been a lot of discussion regarding Record Store Day and the type of things that you could release specifically for Record Store Day. Originally, I thought this was closer to Dirty Mind, to where initially I thought this should have been part of, say, like a Dirty Mind Super Deluxe. But since there aren't any songs from Dirty Mind that's on this set list, not to say that he may or may not have thrown, say, like Head in there somewhere towards the end of the tour. As far as the March 1980 performance, you only have Soft and Wet, Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad, Still Waiting, I Feel For You, Sexy Dancer, Just As Long As We're Together, and I Want to Be Your Lover as far as the set list. So, like I said, you can make an argument and include this with, heck, maybe, if you do a Prince Deluxe set, but like I said, I really at this point don't see those as being sort of box set material. It's sort of like, you take what's been done with the Beatles, the super deluxe sets start with Sgt. Pepper, then the White Album, then Abbey Road, and then I guess we'll get something with Let It Be sometime this year, hopefully. And you could make an argument for somewhere down the line of Rubber Soul and Revolver, but when it comes to things like, say, the first 4 Beatles albums, you really can't really do, say, like a box set that makes sense out of those sessions. You can do a box set, say, where disc 1 kind of covers a certain era, disc 2 covers maybe the set, that type of thing. So I look at sort of For You and Prince as something like that, to where I don't think you can get a box set or a super deluxe on the scope or level of, say 1999 or Purple Rain and anything else within the classic era, so to speak. But you can, say, take elements of this and maybe some of the demos leading up to For You, a few bonus or vault tracks from the second album, and that would make a really great disc 1 of a serious box set covering Prince's whole career. But with this particular set of songs from this particular concert, I think you can make a really good single CD of this, and that would be one of your Record Store Day releases. Because there's different and better and more historical live performances throughout his career, where you can do box set, you could do a big, standalone release of a particular era, or one-nighter, that was just legendary, sort of like the one everyone goes back to is the Small Club After Show. Like, that's something you can release as a standalone CD and just have it compete with any other reissue or historic recording that's out there. and just have it stand on its own merits. But this would be something, like I said, if you don't include it with, say, if you do get away with a Prince Deluxe set, I would rather see this one just be a Record Store Day release, because it's legendary enough, but overall Prince fandom really isn't all that concerned with the Prince Rick James rivalry. But to put this, say, like on vinyl for Record Store Day, even if you do it as a CD for Record Store Day, I think this is one of those special things you could just put out just for that day, even just have it be in limited release. I know a couple of the past ones, my recommendation would be to release it on Record Store Day, and then a couple of weeks go by, and then you make it available for the general public. But this one in particular, I think you can get away with a limited release of this. Throw it, do it on Record Store Day. Sell as many copies as you can after Record Store Day, if there are any left. And once they're all sold out, throw it back in the vault and just kind of do that Disney thing. Just kind of come out with it every so often. That's one of those you can just kind of it'll be the gift that keeps on giving. Put this one out every 5 or 10 years or something, or every 3 to 5 years. Just keep sneaking this one out on Record Store Day or whatever, and until all of us get a chance to have it in our collections. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty decent set, because it's pre Prince. I think everything's solidified with Dirty Mind. So kind of this sort of R&B Prince, this is nice, something that would be nice to just kind of kick back and listen to and enjoy, just based on these songs. It's and yeah, it looks like a pretty good flow to it, because you got Soft and Wet, and Why You Wanna Treat Me So Bad, I Feel For You, Sexy Dancer. That's pretty funky, sort of pre-time, kind of time DNA in that one. Just As Long As We're Together, I always enjoyed that from the first album too. Ends with I Want to Be Your Love, and I bet you they jammed that one out pretty well at the end. So yeah, that's definitely one I would like to see. Again, for a Record Store Day, and you could just do it as a limited edition release, put it out for then, sell as many copies as you can. If it sells out that day, it's gone. If it takes a couple of weeks, fine. Once it's sold out, then throw it back in the vault, let some time go by, and take it from there. So I don't know. That's a pretty good one. Like I said, I thought it was from a little bit closer to the release of Dirty Mind than I thought. But, that'll just let me save my idea for the Dirty Mind era for next week's episode. But what do you think? Were you in attendance at this particular one? Or do you have it in your sort of collection, your sort of private secret collection there? And is this one concert? Is it does it represent an era that you're particularly fond of? Would you like to see it just on Record Store Day? Do you think you could do it as a standalone release and just have it out there for all time? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And then that's going to end this episode of Amari Purple Talk. And you can always find me on Twitter at RichardCole_now. And of course, the now is in all caps. Also, check out AmariCommunications.com. Also, look for my blog. I go through my vinyl collection. It's called What's in the Crate. And I just write about different feelings and memories of certain albums in my collection. Check out, I finally have the one on Shaka Khan, the Rufusized album, and I do reference the beautiful ones in that blog post. Working on the Parade album. That's going to be down the line. It'll be not the next blog post coming up, but the one after that. So definitely be on the lookout for that as well, but definitely check it out. And once again, thanks for tuning in. Also, don't forget to download this episode as well as past episodes of Amari Purple Talk. If you're listening on YouTube, be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. And of course, as always, stay healthy and keep it purple and on the one.